If both sides are still exchanging fire, how can this be called a ceasefire? And is it something more serious than just a blockade?
Donald Trump has the same interpretation of ceasefire as Bibi Netanyahu. They're cut from the same cloth. They don't know what the word means. Now, I know Netanyahu knows what the word means, and what it means for Bibi Netanyahu, Nima, is that under a ceasefire, I can kill more people more efficiently. That's what it means. And that's what he's doing in Lebanon right now. He's not doing that in Gaza, and Naftali Bennett and others are angry at him for not doing it because IDF won't go down in those tunnels. And that's where Hamas is now. They're in those tunnels. And the IDF has told him pointedly, we're not going down in those tunnels. So Bennett and others are really angry with him because he's not finished, in their view, he's not finished eliminating Hamas in Gaza.
With the build-up of refueling aircraft, fighter jets, and weapons in the region, do you think preparations are underway for a short new phase of war, and how long could it last?
I think J.D. Vance, if that Atlantic piece is accurate, or even partly accurate, J.D. Vance is right to be concerned, because one of J.D. Vance's deep concerns, according to this article, is that we are using munitions that we would best keep at hand for other threats that are more important than Iran, that are really threats. So I don't know how to parse this. I know Larry Johnson was saying he thinks they're going to mount another major assault, Israel and the United States. That could very well be, but I'm not sure that I believe that, because one, the markets aren't right. And Trump never attacks unless the markets are positioned for his buddies to make lots of money. And secondly, and probably more importantly, I really don't see the constellation of forces and the disposition of those forces that would, on either side, Israel or the United States, that would make it a very effective attack. Now, they could just go ahead and attack anyway. I think they've proven time and time again that air power and air power alone is not going to do very much. I don't think they're crazy enough to put land power in there of any size. Maybe they might put some special forces in there. They'll get their ass handed to them just like before. So I'm not sure I agree with Larry that we're looking at an imminent attack. I could be wrong. I mean, this administration is stupid enough to prove me wrong, but I don't think we are. I think we're looking at a lot of hullabaloo, a lot of threat, and Donald Trump being very desperate to get enough threat ginned up to where he does really get something of a concession out of the Iranians. To this point, I can see nothing, absolutely nothing, in the way of a concession that he's gotten out of the Iranians that would stick and that would satisfy them in terms of what he would give them back for that concession. Because you know what they want. And what they want, I think, is not transferable, you know, and especially things like, we must get you out of the region. We must have both primary and secondary sanctions lifted. I don't think they're going to give up those things. They'll give up their lives before they give up those things.
Is Iran setting these conditions knowing they won't be met, essentially signaling a return to the pre-war deadlock, but now with greater leverage, especially over the Strait of Hormuz?
I think very, very precedent-setting interview, if you will, with Vladimir Putin. We have a trip coming up by Donald Trump to the number one power in the world, which I think he's going to cancel. I don't think he's going. And we have a whole different situation in terms of the stacked allies against us in this conflict from the day we started it to the present time. I think it's very obvious that Russia is an ally of Iran that will do whatever it has to do to keep them from going down. And it's probably as obvious that China is angry and willing to do a lot in that regard itself. I don't know to what extent totally they will go. More satellites overhead, more diplomatic support, I don't know, but I think Xi Jinping is, and this is something I would not have said 6 or 7 months ago, maybe not even 6 weeks ago. Xi Jinping is mad. He's angry. He's angry with the United States of America. Not a good place to be if you're us. Someone said to me, we need to get our primacy back. I said, this was yesterday. I said, dude, our primacy went a long time ago. We are not prime in the world anymore. China is the number one power in the world, period, bar none. No discussion about it. Come on over. Let's talk about the dimensions of state power. China is the number one power in the world. The only dimension in which they're not globally the hegemon, if you will, and they don't like that term, is financial, and Xi Jinping has just declared he's going to take over that one. And there's no question in my mind he's going to be successful. Then there will be no sanctions, primary or secondary. There will be no banking system. There will be no SWIFT system. Eventually, there will probably be no oil consortium that consists of anything other than China, Russia, and the assets appertaining thereto. You can take ours all day long. You can take ours all day long. That fracked oil, $50, $60 to get out of the ground. Got to have the prices like now in order to make any money off of it and get it out of the ground, which Donald Trump is eating up. He loves it. The Permian Basin in Texas loves it because now their oil is viable on the world market. You get oil back down to where people can live with it again, where it's somewhere below $50 a barrel, and you can't frack. It's uneconomical to do it. You can do it, but you're going to lose a fortune.
With Iran's foreign minister travelling from Islamabad and Moscow to China, and Beijing signalling support despite US sanctions, does this reflect a coordinated strategy to bypass Western pressure?
He was essentially going to let the renminbi, over time, say a decade or so, work its way into 60-70% of the world's GDP. He's already halfway there because that GDP is in Asia. And then present the world with a fait accompli. You cannot deal in the oil markets. You cannot deal anywhere. Commodity markets, whatever. You can't deal anywhere without the renminbi. You no longer need the dollar. The dollar is not the base currency. It's not the transactional currency. It's not the reserve currency. It's the renminbi. Got that, people? He's moved his timetable up, I think. One of the things he would tell Trump probably if Trump made the trip is just that. I'm sure Putin knows it. I'm sure they've coordinated on it. I'm sure they've worked out a way that the ruble's probably going to be right in there for quite a while, if not tandem with the renminbi until they fall apart, which is, I think, inevitable. But it won't be until the empire's diminished considerably in its ability to sanction, which Xi Jinping abhors. He hates sanctions. He's even said he hates them. And I don't blame him. You know, here we sit with 2 billion people under sanctions. And if you read that study, we have killed 38 million people, half of whom are women and children, over the past years since about 2000. About the time of 9/11. With our sanctions, we have killed 38 million people.
Larry, do you think US sanctions policy is driven by the system itself, regardless of who's in power? And could it eventually lose effectiveness as targeted countries adapt?
Exactly. And what it's going to do to us, of course, is it's going to cause us to have to deal directly with our colossal debt, now approaching $40 trillion in aggregate. We're going to have to deal with that without being able to have others buy our debt, buy our currency, have to function in our currency, giving us the leverage to deal with that debt, even if it gets to the gargantuan struggles it is now. Once that's relieved, once that pressure is off, our debt is going to go in terms of our ability to deal with it, and this way in terms of its increase. I mean, you talk about not being able to buy a loaf of bread in Weimar, Germany. we're going to be in that kind of boat if we don't stop this and get a hold on. And this is all the Congress. You can say Donald Trump should be doing something about this, and I will, but I don't expect him to do anything. Our Congress is so guilty in this, and I don't let anybody out of this guilt. They've all been watching this. They've all been signing the checks. They've all been robbing the Treasury year after year after year. And, my father used to say, beware of the Republicans because they'll kill you. Beware of the Democrats because they'll steal you blind. Well, now both parties will kill you and steal you blind. That's where the American taxpayer is today, caught between absolute ineffective parties in terms of physical probity. House of Representatives is supposed to be the place that deals with appropriations. Johnson wouldn't have a clue how to do this, even if he wanted to do it. So we're in trouble, and I keep telling people this, watch out. When we collapse, we're going to collapse with a loud, loud bang, and people's lives are going to be ruined. It's not going to just be $8 a gallon at the pump. It's going to be you can't afford anything. You can't even afford to eat. You can't afford to have a roof over your head. You certainly can't afford all those things you've been thinking about, like a college education for your children and so forth. That's where we're headed. And we're doing it to ourselves. There's no reason whatsoever that we couldn't have worked this out to where the collapse, if you will, is so soft and gentle that we wouldn't even know it was happening by and large, and we could walk our way through it and walk our way out of it. I'm not saying we'll ever be the number one power in the world again. China's got that berth sewed up right now, but she's going to find that's not all that's cracked up to be. She's going to find that's a tough row to hoe. So it would be better, far better, if there was some sort of consortium put together, as I've said so many times, with Beijing, with Moscow, with Tokyo, perhaps, I would even bring Canada and Brazil into it, and anybody else that wanted to actually come into it with the right faith and manage things like nuclear weapons and the climate crisis, because we're going to destroy ourselves with both if we don't do something about it. And the only way we're going to do anything about it is together. How the hell are we going to deal with these problems if we're all fighting each other? If we're in wars like we're in right now, wars of choice, wars that don't need to be, wars that we started, wars that we set up, wars that our little puppy pipsqueak Israel helped us get into. We have to stop this.
If neither side can accept the other's demands, what do you see as the real outcome of this war so far, especially with moves like Iran asserting control over Hormuz and the pressure on U.S. bases in the Gulf?
Disaster for both sides. Disaster for both sides. Iran, because it's lost so many people, lost so many cultural facilities, lost so many educational facilities, medical facilities, war crimes all. And us, because we don't know what we're doing. And we're frittering away what little power we have left in several dimensions. And there is no end to it, as you just pointed out. So what we're going to do is we're going to be beggared, both of us, one on each side of the canal, one on each side of the strait, if you will, with our Saudi allies behind us, essentially as beggared as we are, and staring at each other with this kind of 1,000-mile stare, No one's going to win this war. No one is going to win this war. I would say that Haaretz was right when it said all Iran has to do to win is not lose. So if that's a victory, Pyrrhic though it might be, then Iran will have the victory, but it will be Pyrrhic. That is to say, they won't like it very much because it's going to be just so bloody. And Donald Trump seems like he's intent on making it bloody to the very end and destroying his own country in the process.
Larry, Could a third major outcome of this war be a deep and growing division among GCC countries, and how serious is that risk?
But I don't want to sound flippant, but that's secondary, I think, to a country like Iran, which outweighs all those countries combined. And I mean that. I sincerely mean that. It outweighs all those countries combined. And the United States, which is, getting ready to celebrate its 250th anniversary and committing suicide. It really is tragic. It's not like Adolf Hitler in Germany and Tojo in Japan and Churchill in Britain and Roosevelt in America and Stalin even in Russia. It's very different. It's very different. And it's not like it hadn't happened before. There were empires in the past that, I won't say everybody loved them, but they were better than others. And when they disappeared, there were people who lamented their disappearing who were not necessarily subjects of the empire. They were others who dealt with that empire. Cyrus the Great, for example, and what the Persian Empire represented at that time. There were people who were really sorry to see that calmness, that security, that economic success, such as it was in those days, go away. And to see leaders come and take the helm who were anything but. Same thing happened in the Mogul Empire. There have been empires that went out with a bang and suicidally, and then there have been empires that just sort of faded away. And they faded away principally because they could not pass on the baton of leadership to anyone competent enough to maintain the empire in a reasonable fashion. Do we see something like that happening right here, right now? And I would say Iran's got a problem there too, to a certain extent. Iran's got to find a new leadership also. And I don't think it's necessarily going to come from the war party, as it were. I don't mean the IRGC. It might well come from the IRGC, but I think the new leadership for Iran, and I'm talking about Iran in the 21st century writ positively, if that's possible. I mean, we're all going down if we don't do something about nuclear weapons and the climate. But that Iran has to be led by a younger leadership, a leadership that's sitting in the wings right now, if you will, and wants what Iran wanted at the turn of the 20th century, a real democracy.
Larry, how do you interpret Pete Hegseth's frequent statements? Are they strategic messaging or just bluster?
I need some of his booze at night. I need some of his booze, which puts you totally out of things, I think. I mean, geez. I always thought, I'm going to tell you the truth here. I always thought that using dolphins in a manner that was suicidal for them, strapping explosives on them or whatever, the very depth of depravity, human depravity. Dolphins, in my estimation, and I've had a lot of interplay with dolphins in the ocean, are smarter than we are, far smarter than we are. Dolphins could teach us a few things about life. So what do? We strap explosives on them and send them out to kill a ship or whatever. I mean, that's a perfect example of what Pete Hegseth stands for. Not that he started it, but it's a perfect example of what Pete Hegseth stands for. Kill them all, no quarter. War crimes? War. Don't talk to me about war crimes. Be no Nuremberg tribunal for me.
Larry, if Iran's message is leave us alone, but Trump is still talking about arming internal opposition, does this signal a path toward de-escalation or continued pressure and confrontation?
He's being lied to. He's being lied to by the people around this situation who've been lying about it ever since 1978, and probably before that. But they have been lying about the Iranian people. They've been lying about the situation in Iran on the ground year after year after year. There are people who send money to the Mujahideen Ekak, the MEK. There are people who send money to the Pahlavi family. There are people who think they know more about Iran and some of them are Iranian Americans than people living in Iran. And generally speaking, they're the same kind of people that we have in our country who are so satiated with their own importance, and in many cases, their own wealth. I've met many of them, that they think that's what would make the country better for their return, were they to return. It's sick. It really is sick. And Trump's listening to these people, just like he listens to Laura Loomer and others like her. He's listening to these people. Either that or he is the dumbest son of a bitch on the face of the earth.
Do you think Europe can play a more effective role in today's global tensions?
Europe's as broken as we are. Cast your eye upon it. From the top to the bottom, from the left to the right or right to the left, east, west, west, east, north, south, south, north. They're as bad as we are. Individually, they may be worse. I don't know what's going to happen. Even the Western world is reacting to this inexorable shift of power away from it and to the east with the emotions of a 2-year-old and with the cerebral power of a 4-year-old. No, I can't say that. That's an insult to 4-year-olds.
Do you think continued fighting between Lebanon and Israel would ease or worsen the overall situation, including Gaza and the West Bank?
I think I heard that the president said last night, the president of Lebanon said last night, until Israel honors the ceasefire, we're not stopping. We're not honoring it either. So I don't know what that means. I suspect it means every Lebanese with a weapon is going to take it up and go out and fight the Israelis. I wish that were the case. But he said, I'm not in this anymore if Israel's going to keep on doing what it's doing. There's no ceasefire in Lebanon. Very much still there. And I think I told you, or I said it on one podcast, and the other person knew the area well, so he kind of laughed. But one Lebanese called me and said, I wish the Syrians had come back. It was safer when the Syrians were here.